pop a couple of screens. Esquivel to Garcia. Off the deflection. Los Fresnos comes back and wins. Now Santa Maria will put up a three. Bang! Santa Maria!
There's Warner. Here comes the head of the jam. Counted for two. The field. Adios! And the Falcons win on a walk-off. And it's saved. What a game. What's this? Smack.
To the left. That is gone.
Rafa Perez. That's my play. Off the backboard. Count it. And a win.
And a win. Brian Perez wins the game for the Santa Rosa Warriors, and they go nuts. And why not?
Welcome one and all once again to another Luke Fruia show. I'm Jacob Young. This is Rio Sports Live Network, and this is going to be a fun one. Of course, welcome to Talkin Sports here back at Luke Fruia Buick GMC in Cadillac. If you're in the market for a new car, come and check them out here in Brownsville, Texas. It's an interesting show we have for you today. It's going to be more college heavy than anything. Of course, we'll start off by talking about what to expect this weekend here on Rio Sports Live Network with, of course, all the tournament in full swing for a couple of weeks, really, to say the least. But, of course, more for boys basketball for the past two. Last week, of course, having none other than Thanksgiving week, so that made it a little more difficult, to say the least, to figure out what people's plans were and all of that. And sure enough, there ended up being a tournament for none other than Cherryland High, which we got the final day of because it was tough to find people on Wednesday to get Friday to get coverage for that tournament indeed. And then, of course, big weekend of sports that weekend happened. And, of course, this weekend we have three different tournaments from Brownsville ISD to none other than the Lifer tournament. And on top of that, adding another tournament with the La Feria tournament. So that should be very exciting indeed for this week. It is a gauntlet week, to say the least, for a lot of the crew members and just for everyone, really, because of those tournaments in general will be not necessarily grueling. It will be grueling for the players, meaning they'll have a lot of games and really figure some things out. Of course, that's Thursday, Friday, Saturday is what is happening here. As we take a quick look once again at what to expect this weekend, we don't have really that much information on the La Feria tournament, the Lifer tournament, and the BISD tournament. Well, really, I guess just the La Feria tournament, we really don't have a lot of info for. For the Lifer tournament, should start at 3 p.m., should end at about 7 each day until, of course, Saturday, probably starting earlier. As for the BISD tournament, it's about all day from 8 a.m. to about 9 p.m. for most days. And then, of course, those are each of the days. That's about really all that is on tap here for RSL Network. Of course, you have St. Joseph Academy with their games. They're really their own entity here on RSL Network, and so, of course, they don't necessarily get messed with too much. We just kind of follow what they kind of say on their end, and it works out because, of course, they have their own channel and all that fun stuff. So that's what to expect on Rio Sports Live Network this weekend with, of course, all the basketball tournaments and all that fun stuff. Now we really get into the main thing. Like I mentioned, it's going to be an interesting show. This is going to be more college football, or college heavy to be exact, as well as, of course, happy National Signing Day to all that celebrate this, from, of course, the early signing to the later portions of the signing, which will, of course, be on Thursday as well. Those are kind of, I guess, in a way, for show. That's, of course, the big thing that always happened. And it should be very exciting to say the least. And why will it be so exciting? Well, it's really simple. Those players, of course, for the most part, basketball, football, soccer, baseball, or whatever, they work their tails off in high school to really get to those situations to have those teams kind of wanting them in the end. And then once they hit their senior year, that's a big thing. Tomorrow will be Kennedy Kaiser signing officially her letter of intent to play for none other than the Oklahoma Sooners. She's already, I believe, signed on early signing day, but will make it all official for the public's eyes to see here down in the valley, which is going to be a big thing. Kennedy Kaiser, of course, playing all 4 years for McAllen Memorial girls soccer. She is on the varsity soccer team heading into her senior year this year for soccer. That's going to be very exciting to kind of to be able to play for her senior season. McAllen Memorial, of course, coming off of 2 district titles against none other than the Mac High Lady Bulldogs in girls soccer. Kennedy Kaiser is known for playing really on the left wing for the most part, which has really helped out her team in general. And what she's able to do as well is kind of weave her way through the wings and has been able to score, stays on the ball for the most part, and really is able to fight on her own. She's not the tallest person on the field at all, really. I would almost say she could potentially be a false nine in a way, just on that left side. So skillful. There's a reason why she's going to Oklahoma. There's a reason why she signed to go play for Oklahoma. She had offers from Rice. She had offers from Memphis as well, from the AAC, the American Athletic Conference, I should say. She had offers from, I believe, even Cincinnati potentially. The Houston Cougars, I think, were after her at one point. There were a lot of teams, and then she ended up going for the Oklahoma Sooners. What's the draw with the Oklahoma Sooners? Well, they're in the SEC. That's a big step. Of course, it's not the ACC for girls soccer or women's soccer in general. It's not the Big Ten or anything like that. It used to be, of course, the Pac-12, but since the Stanford Cardinals, the Washington Huskies, and all of them moved over to the Big Ten, the ACC, and all that fun stuff, it has become, of course, the Big Ten more. It's become the ACC again more, and for the SEC, they're a small little bunch where they have been successful at women's soccer but haven't necessarily hit that stride. And the biggest thing, of course, has been none other than the Oklahoma Sooners trying to get bigger signees in general to play on their own side because, well, look at it this way. The Texas Longhorns have been very successful over the years of their volleyball programs growing, and now their women's soccer program is also growing too, to the point of where they've made some runs in the SEC for, trying to get to the tournament and all that fun stuff. And then, of course, you have the likes of Arkansas. The Arkansas Razorbacks have always been very successful, and so Kennedy Kaiser being added to that Oklahoma side, that Oklahoma squad, is going to be very dangerous in general. And the cool part about it is next year with that, or even I think potentially this summer, we'll wait and see. Big things can happen as with that on top of going to college, playing college soccer, you have an opportunity as a player as well in the offseason to go and play for a club, and that means that she could potentially go into, this is of course way off into the future, but this is still the truth, the USLW. She could go and join a team there because it's only a summer league, and then of course go back and play for her club or play for her school, the Oklahoma Sooners. So that's a really cool thing in general of how much that she could really boost her playing style and all of that, and we're looking forward to bringing you all along with that journey in general, as I'll follow along with it too, because Kennedy Kaiser, coached by Coach Matthew Kaiser, yes, her father has been her head coach throughout this whole entire time. She's been playing, of course, select soccer, travel soccer to be exact, basically over in Austin throughout the whole entire time, through the Austin ranks, through just going further and further and all that fun stuff. So there's a lot of success for Kennedy Kaiser coming her way. All I can hope for, of course, is that she gets to play a lot and gets to start for a lot of games. Point is, playing on the field time is going to be key for her growth, for her development as a soccer player, whether or not she's going to Oklahoma, whether or not wherever she goes. Yes, of course, it's confirmed that she is going to Oklahoma, but my whole point in that is as long as she's able to train well with the first team, as long as she's able to play, not necessarily with the first team, but just have a lot of minutes on the field, that's going to be the most beneficial thing that she can possibly have. And that's all that we can hope for, because in the end, players' goals aren't necessarily just through college. No, they want to advance through the ranks. They want to advance, of course, not only to the USLW, they want to go to the NWSL. That is the key, of course, for an American women's soccer player in general, is to go to that the National Women's Soccer League, to potentially play for the Portland Thorns, to potentially play for the Houston Dash, or really, of course, where things have been successful, Orlando Pride, the Washington Spirit, of course. Olympic Reign, Seattle Reign, they've been okay, but that's a team, of course. New Jersey Gotham, they just won the NWSL title, so it seems like that players, of course, will want to strive for, and of course, as things get more and more successful for the NWSL, they're able to pay their players a lot more, and we're seeing that with, of course, the likes of Trinity Rodman and all that fun stuff, and we'll see where she lands, could potentially land in Europe. So there's a lot of success that can definitely come Kennedy Kaiser's way down the road. She just needs to be able to have enough minutes on the field to make it worth her while. And that is just the key thing. I'm so excited to see Kennedy Kaiser, of course, on her senior year, and then go off, of course, to college and play with the Oklahoma Sooners. Of course, most of those games will be on the SEC Network Plus in the fall next year, which will be very exciting indeed. And, of course, some on the SEC Network in general as well. College soccer doesn't get as much love as it should because, of course, it's going to be outnumbered by college football when the time comes on the Thursdays, on the Tuesdays, and all that fun stuff. So, meanwhile, as we talked really quickly about it, this is a big thing. This is a big key factor to jump into. And I mentioned it. And it's going to be a lot of college football talk today because there's so much to talk about. There's so much. There's from the 12-team playoff, of course, the rankings, the final rankings of the regular season, I should say, and the penultimate rankings in general. Because next week after this, let me be clear, next Tuesday, after this weekend of games, we will know who's in to the playoffs. We will know who just missed out, and we'll probably be going to the Pop-Tart Bowl. We'll probably be going to the Citrus Bowl. We'll probably be going to the Alamo Bowl, and of course all those other bowls where those teams just missed out in general. The two most prestigious bowls now where you just missed out, simple. It's the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl for the SEC versus Big Ten, and it's the Pop-Tarts Bowl for the ACC Big 12. And then, of course, the rest of them are just at-large teams that just missed it. So you'll get a mixture of, like we had last year for the Valero Alamo Bowl, of BYU and Colorado, where they were both just missing out on the playoffs in general and all that fun stuff. So right now, like we mentioned, still the Utah Utes are out and BYU Cougars are out of the playoffs at the moment, with, of course, none other than the Texas Longhorns. They've lost 3 games, and their 2 losses that were in the SEC happen to be against 3 and 8 Florida. Or 4 and 8 Florida now, but point is, a bad loss. Then, on top of that, losing to Georgia, and not to mention, of course, Ohio State. The Ohio State loss is not killing Texas. It's literally the Florida loss, as well as, of course, an extra loss against Georgia. That was the killer, the final nail in the coffin. If they only have 2 losses, if Texas only had 2 losses, of course, heading into DKR when they played against Texas A&M and beat Texas A&M there, then you're talking about a Texas team that's in the playoffs easily. But since they have that loss against Florida, since they have those 3 losses, they're not making the playoffs. They've been eliminated, basically. I know that it's not officially, but that's the real truth. And so there's no chance for Texas to really make the playoffs in the end. And let's just talk about, of course, your 12 teams that have at the moment locked themselves in to the playoffs and most likely will stay there. There's an outside chance that, of course, things will shake up and change. And, of course, that all happens to be with the ACC championship game where it's Duke versus Virginia. If Virginia somehow lose, all of a sudden, there's no ACC team truly that will be in the playoffs. I don't see Miami most likely making it or anything like that. So that's a whole thing on the outside. But let's look at, of course, the 12 teams in the CFP playoff rankings as it, of course, stood here yesterday. Last night, those were your teams. The 12 teams so far. Let's go with, of course, number one, the top 4 seeds that would have a bye week. Of course, a bye all depends, of course, on how things go with the championships. But as it stands, Ohio State would be the 1 seed, Georgia being the, Indiana being the 2 seed, Georgia being the 3, Texas Tech being the 4. Here's the key thing to remember. Indiana will play Ohio State this Saturday in the Big Ten Championship. Indiana's a lock, but are they a lock at the number 2 side? No, because if Texas Tech do win the Big 12 championship, they would most likely jump up to probably 3. If Georgia wins the SEC, they probably jump up into number 2. If Georgia lose, they may lose out on a bye. That is the truth, because they play against Alabama, and if Alabama win, all of a sudden they would probably jump into, but if not potentially that 3rd, they'd probably jump into Ole Miss's shoes, and Ole Miss would probably fall back to maybe number 7, maybe number 8, somewhere around that note. Because right now, of course, let's look at the rest of them. That's the top 4 as it would stand. The 5th would be Oregon, 6th would be Ole Miss, 7th would be Texas A&M, and 8th is Oklahoma. 9th is Alabama, 10th is none other than, well, they only have, of course, a couple, so they're missing a couple of them. Anyways, the first round matchups, let's just talk about that right now. It's looking like number 9 seed Alabama and number 8 seed Oklahoma. Number 12 seed Tulane would go to number 5 Oregon. And number 11 Virginia Cavaliers, if of course they win the ACC title, they would play against the Ole Miss Rebels. As it stands, number 10 Notre Dame would face number 7 Texas A&M. But again, things can change very quickly once again. So that's where, of course, we have at the top, of course, 12, Ohio State Buckeyes, Indiana Hoosiers, Georgia Bulldogs, Texas Tech Red Raiders, Oregon Ducks, Ole Miss Rebels, Texas A&M, Oklahoma Sooners, Alabama Crimson Tide, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, BYU Cougars, and the Miami Hurricanes. That would be your top 12. But here's the thing. That's, of course, the top 25 according to the AP poll, is what it seems like. So, because like we mentioned, no one is reading off BYU making it. No one is reading off, the 12. So those top 25s, for the most part, from the AP poll, mean nothing. They absolutely mean nothing. And that is the craziest part, because the AP poll are just with beat writers. That's how they make the top 25. That's how they did it for the longest time way back in the day. And, of course, even before then, the AP poll, they would just vote on who the national champion was before they went to this thing called the BCS. The BCS had this weird system where basically you would have 2 undefeated teams face off to decide the national champion every single year. So it was kind of a bad committee, and then you would be able to go to a key thing, finally, the playoffs in 2014. 4 teams all the way up until 2024. That was last year, to be exact, was the first year of the playoffs for the college football, the FBS, the FCS had been doing college playoffs forever and ever. And so that was pretty interesting, of course, to say. So again, you look at that top 12, and it's a pretty interesting top 12 to say the least from the college football playoff ranking. We have all of it basically here. From, of course, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and conference champion number 4 would be the 11th seed. Conference champion number 5 would be the 12th seed. And though the 12th seed would face off against Oregon, the 11th seed would face off against Ole Miss. The Ole Miss Rebels, of course, in 6th. So the first 2 teams out at the moment would be now BYU, the BYU Cougars, and Miami, Florida University. There is no way, shape, or form Texas makes it into the playoffs. They're not even the first 2 out. And they finished their season. So they're a guaranteed lock, basically, for the Citrus Bowl. So for Texas fans, book your tickets to the Citrus Bowl because that's where you're heading. You are heading to Miami, Florida, or you're heading to Florida. You're not heading to Hard Rock Stadium for the national championship. No, you're heading to go play against a team for technically a meaningless bowl. Their season is done and dusted. That is the best way to put it. So that's, of course, your college football playoff update on the bracket. And, of course, broken down, it's pretty interesting. Of course, Texas A&M, they end up losing by 10 to none other than their rivals, Texas. And we'll get into that a little later on because I do want to talk about, I ended up going to that game. I want to talk about my experience, of course, from just Darrell K. Royal Stadium, Memorial Stadium to be exact, and how it differs from College Station, of course, for the stadium in general, and how it differs from the stadiums that I've been to. So very excited to talk about that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
Rev up your future with Texas Southmost College's Auto Body Repair Program. In just 2 semesters, you'll gain the skills to become an auto body repair specialist. Learn using industry-standard iCar Academy to get you job-ready fast. If you're ready to drive your career forward, TSC's Auto Body Repair Program is the place to start. Classes are filling fast, so visit tsc.edu and apply today.
Elevation, AT4, AT4X, Denali. Case closed. Fruia GMC, we're professional grade.
Back we go once again here, and lots to cover in an hour, and we're already almost halfway done, basically. It's 2:23 p.m. on a beautiful Wednesday afternoon here in Brownsville, Texas. It's an overcast day, to be exact. Let's give you, of course, an updated temperature here on, well, December 3rd, 2025. It's 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Storms are possible. It's mostly cloudy for the most time. I would even say it's more overcast than anything. And it's only going to be like that. It doesn't look like there's going to be any storms. Rain basically at 11 a.m. the next day, to be exact. So that's really where the rain will happen, is going to be really tomorrow in general. So that's going to be fun. And again, we talked about it with, of course, the rain and all that. Well, we have the Brownsville ISD basketball tournament starting tomorrow, and we'll go all the way until Saturday, the championship game. Of course, after that, it will be done and dusted. And then, of course, we have really one more week left of basketball tournaments, and we can kiss those, and we can say that, well, the basketball tournaments will be done and dusted next week. And after that, of course, it's just regular season basketball. Not to mention until, of course, the new year, all of a sudden we have the full soccer season officially starting up. Not on the TAP side, on the UIL side to be exact, so that's going to be exciting. I've already seen, of course, the lights on for the most part throughout a lot of high schools. And so they've started, of course, from their tryouts to now finding their team, and they're going to be practicing until that first game of the regular season. So very exciting once again. As you can see, I've got, of course, my Arsenal jersey on. Today they do play. I've got on the back of it Chloe Kelly, the savior of the English women's national team, winning that one. And, of course, yes, she does play for the Arsenal women's soccer team, the women's football club to be exact. So very exciting once again. But let's get into something that's pretty interesting. Well, before we head into the coaching carousel that is college football, let's talk about, of course, the game that everyone was interested in after Thanksgiving Day, in at least Texas, because, well, there was something pretty special before the Texas A&M Texas football game at Texas for the first, Texas hosting Texas A&M for the first time in like 5,000 something. Our Texas before that game on Friday, Texas A&M beat Texas pretty comfortable at Darrell K. Royal Stadium. And so I was going to be watching this game at home, probably watching it with a friend and cousin and all. Yes, I will definitely want to go to this game on Thanksgiving, or, well, on Black Friday, you know, the Friday of the game. So I took that advantage and went. Now, of course, I get there. We checked into the hotel before, and it's the hotel right next to the stadium as well, so it's very, very cool. I would have to say, it's pretty funny. There's a little funny, you know, thing about it is that the way that Texas has embraced the SEC is kind of hilarious because, of course, myself being a Texas A&M fan for all of my life, growing up into it, and basically, yes, of course, I never graduated from Texas A&M or anything like that, or have ever taken a class or anything like that, but I've been there all of my life. I basically grew up there and have, in a way, graduated there. And so, honorarily is what I'm saying. I went straight into working for RSL is my point, and I've been there. I've been to Texas A&M basically all my life. I go there more than once a year, I would definitely say that. And so it's very fun for basketball, baseball, any other sports. So going back into this was a big thing. Was being here at the hotel, I check in. It's very burnt orange everywhere, of course. It's their game day. It's big. And so we get a room key in the hotel. And it's burnt orange. It's got the Texas logo on it, and it says SEC on the bottom. Reason why I'm bringing this up is because in 2012, when Texas A&M joined the SEC, all the Texas fans, I remember saying, oh, you're just leaving there to get away from Texas and all this fun stuff. And, oh, you're leaving here because you're afraid of us. Which, of course, that was back we go once again to here. Anyways, going back to what I was talking about here was, of course, just Texas and the way that they were able to. It's kind of hilarious how they just all of a sudden really started to embrace, of course, the SEC. But Texas A&M, of course, they saw the success that it led for Texas A&M in their athletics. Each step of the way, their new facilities, Texas A&M's new facilities left and right and all of this. And then here comes Texas trying to get into the SEC all of a sudden after they made fun of Texas A&M for so long, the Longhorns wanting to join the SEC. They were able to finally do that after their contract expired and all that fun stuff. So it was pretty interesting, to say the least, with all of that. And sure enough, so they started to embrace it. And it just made me chuckle and made me laugh because it was, you know, for so long that they had that sort of kind of gimmick on the way, and finally they're just embracing being in the SEC and all this fun stuff. So, again, I get to go to this game, and go to the stadium, and it had a lot of, because I've been to Kansas City, I've been to Arrowhead Stadium, I've been to none other than Jerry World, I've been to the Alamo Dome, I've been to NRG Stadium, I've been to other places like that. And I've even technically visited other stadiums, like, well, before the Vaqueros were at HEB Park, I was at that stadium, I've been to a lot of different venues, is what I'm trying to say. And for Darrell K. Royal Memorial Stadium, let me tell you something. It felt very corporate, to say the least, when I stepped up there. It wasn't an eerie feeling or anything like that. It was just the outside was it felt so run down, and it just reminded me of almost not necessarily an abandoned, but just it reminded me of the outside of Arrowhead Stadium. Not impressive is what I'm trying to say. It was unappealing too. Texas A&M has the brick facade around their outside. I've been to the Rice's baseball stadium. It's the same deal. It's very nice, and it felt clean. That was a complete difference for Darrell K. Royal Stadium. A lot of concrete. It reminded me of old Kyle Field, and just an old feel, and not one of those new stadiums. This is what I'm trying to say. And so you could definitely tell the age of that stadium. Heading into my seats as well, for that stadium, it was interesting to say the least, because again, you're going through not this turnstile, but you're going through the ramp to get to your seat, and it's as small, as cramped as can be. Felt very uncomfortable. I'm claustrophobic in general, so I did not like that in general, because it's just small, cramped space trying to walk through. People are walking out as people are going through to go to their seats. I don't understand that. Here's an interesting thing, too. First time that I get there, I mean, it was fine. We were around a lot of Texas fans, but we were so close, sort of close enough to the Texas A&M band, which was kind of cool, and just kind of felt that little rivalry right there. And so, point is, throughout that whole time, there were very nice fans, and then there were some fans that were, one was passionate. Others were, well, we saw it pretty closely, classless at Texas. You will always, of course, let me be clear, you will always find that at every single team, pro or not. You will always have those fans that take it too far, that are there just to cause disturbance, just to, they're not there to watch the game. They're there to cause problems. And so, sure enough, there was a big police presence for this game in general, and there were fans that were kicked out, and there were fans that were Texas fans that got kicked out as well. One Texas fan we did see, and you will see that, of course, on the Campus PD Twitter or whatever, threw a beer on Texas A&M sideline, full can. Probably got arrested that night. So, like I said, it just all depended. Overall, I'd say DKR 7 out of 10. Just as a fan experience, it just needs renovation. That's it. It just needs to look nicer. More concrete around the surrounding areas where people walk would be nice. I had to walk through the grass to get to my gate to go in. There's like little things like that as a fan perspective from Texas, and any fan that walks through those gates would say, yeah, that needs to be better in general. And so that's just, of course, my thoughts into that, and it's fair in my eyes. Like I said, it's definitely 7 out of 10 experience. Again, Kyle Field, of course, people would say I'm just biased. It's 9 out of 10. Again, you don't have to walk through the grass to get to your gate. There's concrete. There's plenty of concrete. There's plenty of sidewalk to walk to. You don't feel like you might have to walk onto the street just to get to your gate. And that's the truth, the given truth on that. I think in the next 2 years, Gerald K. Royal will probably have an immense upgrade, an immense renovation. Oh yeah, DKR still has turf on their field. Get rid of that turf. There's no need. They're in Austin, Texas. Why Texas still has turf is beyond me. There's no need. Every single school in the SEC has grass. Maybe Kentucky are the exception. That's about it. So it's just, why? Why have turf? It makes no sense. There was a funny story about that game as well. Texas was holding in the backfield pretty much all game. And there's one call that just the referees didn't call, and there was an obvious hold, and that's when Arch Manning went for a long run. And you could see it, and I did the signal of that, and one fan, again, it's a funny story in general. I'm not mad about it or anything. He was, like I said, passionate. Just yelled, "Cry!" at me, and that was pretty funny. In general, I kind of looked over, I'm like, okay. I was fine. I didn't even say a word. I wasn't even yelling or anything. I was just like, that's not okay. And sure enough, that Texas fan, yelled at me, and I'm like, okay. His friend next to him was like, why? Well, he wasn't, what? But, yeah, like I said, full experience, 7 out of 10. Stadium had a lot to do with it. That's really it. It wasn't even the fans for me. But, yes, Texas A&M, they deserve to lose that game the way that they came out in the second half. It was a fair, frustrating, and sure enough, they lose their chance to play in the SEC championship, and they lose their chance at a bye, but they get to host a first-round playoff game. It's looking to be against Notre Dame. That one will probably change after these championship games, and I'm pretty certain Texas A&M will probably go to a 6th seed, if I had to say so myself, and that will be beneficial for the Aggies in my eyes, because I just don't expect them to play Notre Dame for a second time this year, third time in the span of 2 years, basically, which is wild to say. But looking forward to it all. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we will talk about the coaching carousel, and that's how we will finish off the show. I have a feeling that that's going to take the whole 20 minutes or a little under that, to be exact. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
Kenny Perez came from a small town in Texas. At Kenny Perez Law, we won't stop fighting until our clients get what's rightfully theirs. We're right by your side, no matter what. Call Kenny Perez Injury Lawyers today, 956-999-1111.
Turn your passion into a powerful career at Texas Southmost College. Our automotive technology program will train you in everything from maintenance to full vehicle systems repair. Earn a certificate or associate degree and get certified to work as a C maintenance or B-level technician. You'll be guided by seasoned instructors who have decades of real-world automotive experience, helping you get ready to roll into the industry. So take the wheel and apply today at tsc.edu.
Back we go once again to hear from Luke Fruia Motors, Luke Fruia Buick GMC and Cadillac. I'm Jacob Young. This is Rio Sports Live Network. If you're in the market for a new car, come check out Luke Fruia Buick GMC and Cadillac here in Brownsville, Texas. Well, we mentioned it, and now it's time to talk about it. The coaching carousel that is college football, because even more news today has came across my phone, I should say, this morning, which was pretty interesting. And that's, of course, more moves in the college football world. But let's start off with, of course, the biggest news really out of the start. Let's start from the very beginning. The first team to fire their head coach this season were the Florida Gators. They ended up firing Billy Napier very early on in the season after a very abysmal start, losing to the University of South Florida, losing to a couple of other teams, but beating the Texas Longhorns. University of Florida, for example, with that win against the Texas Longhorns, not only has eliminated the Texas Longhorns from playoff contention, but for Florida football, they do end up beating the Seminoles of Florida State University. That was their game that they ended up winning. (40-21). Why I bring that game up is because they got decimated by Kentucky 38-7. They got beaten by 4 against the Georgia Bulldogs. They beat the Mississippi State Bulldogs as well. They lost to Texas A&M 34-17. They beat Florida 29. Texas 29-21. They lost to Miami, Florida, 26-7. They lost to LSU 20-10, and they lost to South Florida 18-16. Before, of course, shutting out LIU 55-0. Point is, they fired Billy Napier, and then, of course, we're looking for a head coach. Not too long down the line, Texas A&M ended up playing against LSU to be 10-0 for the first time since 1992, around that era. Texas A&M ended up beating none other than LSU and took over, really, their stadium. Well, it turns out not too long after that, Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers kind of got into it. The whole entire administration got into it. And sure enough, it left Brian Kelly fired from the LSU Tigers. That's a big job in general in the whole entire college football landscape. You look at, of course, Les Miles. You look at none other than the one and only Alabama Crimson Tide coach of Nick Saban. Like, there's lists and lists of coaches that had an opportunity to kind of take that job in general. Ole Miss Rebels, of course, having a phenomenal year for their first time in, forever having a chance at the playoffs is what I mean by a phenomenal year for them. And so there were things that were looking great for this team. And so the Ole Miss Rebels waited and waited, and then all of a sudden, Ole Miss making a statement, having to put out a statement that says after the Egg Bowl, which is the famous Ole Miss Rebels versus the Mississippi State Bulldogs, they'll get to play, they play, a statement will be made after. And so it was a long time, and all of a sudden, the Ole Miss Rebels head coach, Lane Kiffin, leaves. Lane Kiffin gets hired by the Ole Miss Rebels. He got hired around 2019. And he built that program back up from having just about the death penalty on them in general, put on them in general, because of paying players before players being paid were a thing, before it was legal to pay those players in general. And so that was a big scandal, big findings from the NCAA that came out in general. And so it was all this fun stuff and a big thing in general. What I'm trying to say here was that Lane Kiffin ended up leaving the Ole Miss Rebels and was forced out. Not necessarily forced out, but he's in a way forcibly removed from the Ole Miss Rebels and won't be able to coach them through their playoff run. They are guaranteed a playoff spot, whether that's 6, whether that's 7, whether that's going to be 8. All that fun stuff, he's not allowed to coach. And so it's pretty interesting. The Tulane head coach, same deal. He's leaving, but he's going to be able to coach. And then, of course, there's a lot of other coaches that have kind of left. And so that whole deal was wild. And the way that Lane Kiffin just kind of strung the Ole Miss Rebels administration kind of along, I think that's what really broke the camel's back in a way. And that's what made the Rebels organization say, okay, you're going to go to LSU. You're going to go to an SEC school. Our rivals as well, a top dog in the SEC. And you're just going to go there, okay, we don't want you coaching. And sure enough, he's not going to be the one that's going to be coaching the Ole Miss Rebels. And so it's kind of a dumpster fire situation over there. And Ole Miss are completely right to, in a way, kind of right. And Lane Kiffin's done this before. This is what makes this whole thing kind of crazy. Lane Kiffin, he coached the Tennessee Volunteers for a long time, and this is why this is such a big deal. He left the Tennessee Volunteers kind of in the same situation. He left them kind of to rot, and sure enough, there were riots again in Knoxville. That said, Lane Kiffin sucks. And all this whole thing, like the way that he got up and left the Tennessee Rebels without really having a true goodbye just shows a lot of his character, a lot of his head coaching and all that. He gets a job at USC. That's the job that he took, I believe, after Pete Carroll. He did a horrific job at USC, by the way, to the point of where he was able to get fired and then trying to save his career at Florida Atlantic University, does exactly that, and sure enough gets a job at Ole Miss. And so just the way that he ended up leaving again is just, it's frustrating. It shows that he has not grown. It shows that he's all about money, of course, and all that. The crazy part is, just listen to this. LSU are now paying 3 different coaches, 3 different head coaches. They have to get enough money to pay off Brian Kelly. It's what it's looking like in 60 days or something like that. They have to come up with the money of $53 million to buy him out officially, because apparently Brian Kelly was fired with no clause. So that's a crazy situation, or with no cause, I should say. And then on top of that, they still are paying out Ed Ogeron's contract. They still owe $17 million to former national champion head coach and Baton Rouge native, or Louisiana native, Ed Ogeron. So that's a crazy situation in LSU, to say the least, all by itself. Then on top of that, it gets even crazier. Listen to this. Texas A&M's on their run as well. 11-1 for the first time since, again, 1992. The last time that they did go 11-0, they ended up losing to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the Cotton Bowl. Crazy enough to say. And this was a big thing. Texas A&M, off of their first year with Mike Elko, they get this phenomenal offensive coordinator, Colin Klein. Colin Klein in 2012 was a Heisman finalist with Johnny Manziel, with Johnny Football. And so Colin Klein knew about A&M. He takes this job, and offensive coordinator for the 2 years has been spectacular. Has really run a great offense for the Texas Aggies. He's really helped work out this team and finding something that A&M hadn't had for a while, almost since Johnny Manziel, has been that Cliff Kingsbury. Again, back when Johnny Manziel was a player, there was the offensive coordinator. And we've seen how well he's done in the NFL, or how well he's done in his career. He tried the head coaching gig for a while. It did not necessarily work out too well, but he went back to his bread and butter as an offensive coordinator. Of course, this year has not been the best year for the Washington Commanders, but you take into that consideration, okay, and finally having this type of offense, this is great. This is what the Aggies wanted. Well, with that also comes this. Kansas State have not had themselves the best year, so they kind of forced out their head coach to retire, to be exact. And so Kansas State native, because he did graduate from there, Colin Klein, got a job offer from Kansas State and says he's going to feel things out with Texas A&M. Accepting the job is inevitable, but he says, I'm not going to accept anything until the end of the Texas A&M run for the playoffs. That says so much right there about Colin Klein compared to Lane Kiffin, that he's not just going to abandon his players in some sort of terrible way. His players, his fans, all of that. And so, as an Aggie, I wish him the best when that time comes. For now, he's focused on winning games still with Texas A&M, winning that first playoff game, and then on top of that, winning the quarterfinals. I think that's a phenomenal season for me on that retrospect. Of course, everyone still says, why can't it be us? Why can't it be Texas A&M to win the whole thing? I think there's a lot of holes still with the Aggies if they don't fix those things that they showed against Texas. Because it's not like Texas was a great team. They were so beatable. Marcel Reed made so many bad reads in that game. Those 2 turnovers right in the end zone. The missed field goal early on in the game. Right there. It's little things like that that really made Texas A&M lose that game when they should have been able to win it. And that's the truth. And if those things need to be figured out in the last 3 weeks, Le'Veon Moss is 100% healthy. That's another running back for Texas A&M, so all this fun stuff. But I go back to it. The coaching carousel couldn't be any more fun right now because of the way that everything has just been working out perfectly. So it's a really good sort of look, to say the least, for the playoffs in general and for who's going where. Of course, I believe Florida have found their head coach, and Arkansas have done the same thing. And so basically the SEC, as well as the last day on that Sunday night, we find out that Mark Stoops, yes, a coach that was moments away from being taken, brought to Texas A&M University. Yes. He has been relieved of his duties. He has been fired from the Kentucky Wildcats. This is his second year. His second year he's been fired. The Mark Stoops era at Kentucky has ended very quickly. Mark Stoops, of course, son of, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just, it's a crazy situation. It really is a crazy situation for all of this with the coaching carousel and how this is all happening right before conference championship games and 3 weeks away from the first round of the playoffs, which start on the 21st and 20th. The 20th and 21st, if I'm not mistaken, that Friday and Saturday, before we really get into that whole entire Christmas week of events. It's crazy. The situation couldn't be any more crazy for college football, and that's why That's why college football is so much more special than any other pro sport, truly. Of course, that's besides soccer or anything like that, because soccer has its own craziness. The NHL technically has its own craziness too. But even then, I would say the NCAA, the college football retrospect has that beaten for the most part. But it's just, things get pretty crazy. Things get pretty wild here in the college football wild, wild west. And I cannot wait, because this weekend of games are going to be exciting too. The ACC title game. It's the Duke Blue Devils. 8-4 Duke Blue Devils playing against none other than the Virginia Cavaliers. Virginia Cavaliers. They have not been great at football for a while. They flew by the ACC and now have this opportunity to win the ACC, and they should be able to. The Virginia Cavaliers should be able to. That is on Saturday, December 6th at 7 p.m., and should be, again, interesting to say the least, as if the Cavaliers if the Cavaliers win, they're in. If they lose, they are out, and most likely the ACC will miss out on a bid, and that will go to a G5 program. That means James Madison could potentially be in. BYU could potentially be in as another team from the Big 12 besides the Texas Tech Red Raiders, which are a guaranteed lock. If they were to lose the or the Big 12 title game, then that would most likely benefit two teams, if I had to say so myself, into the Big 12. But who knows? They should be able to destroy BYU, as BYU, of course, ended up losing, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no, they ended up winning this past Saturday, so that was a big victory for them. So, again, so much in the Big 12, so much in the SEC, just everything about it. Couldn't be any more fun, and basketball is just about in full swing, too, for college, as all of those non-conference tournaments are done and dusted from Feast Week, and you go back into it and look at all that fun stuff. It's good. So, looking forward to it, and looking forward to bring you all that fun coverage from it. We'll, of course, have a couple weeks before all that really gets started. Bowl week, of course. We'll have, of course, the conference championship games, and then we will not only have the conference championship games, but we will also, just in general for all of it, but we'll also be able to have the the Army-Navy game the week after on CBS, a stored tradition, and then after that starts the bowl weeks, Bowl Mania to be exact, so it's always very, very fun. That'll do it for us here from Luke Fruia Motors, as it's just about to hit 3 p.m. It's officially hit 3 p.m. to say the least, and so we're looking forward to that. Thank you all so very much for watching. It's been a fun one as always. Until then, we will see you all very soon. I've been Jacob Young. This has been a Real Sports Live presentation. And until next time,